Take a look at these two guns. Tell me, which one would you say fits better into the world of Fallout? Well, if you answered this one, then congratulations, you're a certified Chad Fallout enjoyer. But if you answered this one, then I'm sorry to inform you, but you're probably a one intelligence build who doesn't understand Fallout's deep lore. Now I understand that some of y'all may be flabbergasted at this news. You may be thinking, wait, I thought Fallout was a fantasy game set in a hyper-stylized 1950s retro-futuristic world. How can real-life modern guns like this fit into the game? Well, your confusion is perfectly understandable. So, allow me to explain as I answer the most controversial question in the Fallout community. Do modern guns belong in Fallout? So here's the thing, the two guns I showed you from earlier are both from Fallout games. This one is from Fallout 4, and it's called the Assault Rifle, which is kind of hilarious because it's not even named properly. It's a weird mutated mishmash of random machine gun parts. On the other hand, there's the Marksman Carbine from Fallout New Vegas, which is based on the M4 with custom attachments. Now I'm guessing you can see the problem. There's obviously a huge conflict of aesthetics, and that's exactly why this issue has become so controversial. Because the guns in Fallout used to look like this, and now they look like this. Yeah, that's quite a huge downgrade. Players hate these new guns so much that the first thing they do right after installing Fallout 4 is immediately download modern gun mods to completely replace the vanilla ones. As a result, these gun mods have become extremely popular. They show up on the trending page all the time, and basically every month, at least one of them ends up earning a spot in the top 5 highest voted mods of the month. However, there's also some backlash from those who say that these modern guns do not belong in Fallout. They say these guns are not lore-friendly, and that they don't exist in Fallout. But oh boy, that is just objectively wrong. Clearly, these naysayers have never played the older Fallout games. Those who have only played Fallout 4 or 76 have the wrong impression on which guns truly belong in the Fallout universe. If you've only played those two, then you would probably assume that all the guns in Fallout are supposed to be goofy-looking knockoff Walmart toys that are based purely on a retro fantasy aesthetic. And I can't blame you for assuming that. Fallout 4 and 76 do a terrible disservice to Fallout's wonderful and diverse arsenal. On the other hand, if you take a look at the older Fallout games, there's plenty of real-life modern-day guns to go around. Some examples include, but are not limited to, the Desert Eagle, the Beretta M9, the P90, the MP5, the G3, the FAL, the Steyr AUG, the L85, the M249 SAW, and of course, the iconic AR platform. But when you look at Fallout 4 and 76, they don't have a single one of these guns. The most modern gun they've got is the minigun, and that's about it. So, that begs the question, what happened to all the modern guns then? Why aren't they present in Fallout 4 and 76? Well, Fallout 4 was kind of like a soft reboot for the franchise. A lot of things got retconned, and the aesthetics were completely overhauled. They basically took the retrofuturism slider and turned it up to comically high levels. Now everything just looks like it's straight out of an episode of The Jetsons. The buildings, cars, and the firearms especially all look super goofy and cartoonish. From an artistic perspective, it makes sense to have everything follow a central theme. And if your central theme is a highly fantasized, cartoonish 1950s retro-futuristic aesthetic, God, that was a mouthful, then yeah, real-world modern firearms don't really fit that theme too much. If you install a modern gun mod for Fallout 4, then it just looks out of place. So as it turns out, I lied. Modern guns do not belong in Fallout. Fallout 4 and 76 specifically, that is. But the real issue isn't that modern guns don't belong in Fallout. It's that Fallout 4 and 76 don't belong in Fallout. If you take that very same gun from earlier and put it into Fallout New Vegas, then it fits in perfectly fine. That's because the older Fallout games don't feel so cartoonish. Don't get me wrong, there's still plenty of wackiness, but overall they feel much more serious and gritty. Of course, the series has always had the 50s retro vibe too, but it's just different in the older games because they also mixed in elements from the modern day, so it feels much more familiar. Real-life modern guns work perfectly fine with this art style, and that is exactly why the developers of the older Fallout games decided to include them. Plus, they just look really cool, and the fans absolutely love them. And to be clear, the term modern gun can refer to any gun made after World War II, because that basically marks the beginning for the modern era of firearms. I know it may sound odd to call a 50-plus-year-old gun modern, but the reason why is because those half-century-old designs are still in use today. So again, using the AR platform as the prime example, it was first designed and produced in the 1950s, and that core design is still in use today. The heart of the weapon is essentially the same. The main difference really are the accessories. Like a Vietnam-era M16A1 looks quite different from our current-day AR-15 derivatives. I'm sure most of us can agree that the classic M16 and M4 belong in Fallout. But as for something like the Honey Badger, well, that's more questionable. We've established that modern guns are canon in Fallout, but just how modern do things get? Is the cutoff point at the 90s, or does it keep going? At which point do the firearms in Fallout diverge from our universe? After all, the world of Fallout is set in a divergent timeline. Technology and computers developed drastically different from our world, but there's nothing stopping firearms from developing as normal. The divergence point for firearms specifically could be much, much later on. To find the answer, we can just look at which guns have been present in previous Fallout games. I would say the Marksman carbine from New Vegas is the best example of just how modern Fallout's guns can get. Just look at this thing. It's got Picatinny rails, an adjustable stock, and a hybrid ACOG sight. Now that is quite a tactical modern firearm. The M4 which it's based on was first produced in 1993. This is easily the most modern looking gun in the entire franchise. So you could say that 1993 is the year of firearm divergence. But another thing to take note of is that it's got custom attachments on it which are from the early 2000s. This adjustable PRS stock was made in 2005, and while the original ACOG sight was made in the 90s, a hybrid variant wouldn't surface until 2007. So we can also say that some accessories from the early 2000s are canon in Fallout. Additionally, we should also take into consideration that Fallout New Vegas was released in 2010, so this was still new in our world when the game was being developed. The same goes for the classic Fallout games, which were made in 97, 98, and 2001. At the time, they were including current-day pop culture firearms. New Vegas simply continued the tradition. If these old Fallout games were made today, then it's entirely plausible that they would have included next-generation weapons such as the MCX Spear, but that's just speculation. So another question is, should Fallout officially include these newer guns, or should things just stay as they are? Well, the only way I can answer that is after talking about today's sponsor, Manscaped. Listen up, men. It's 2023. We are not cavemen. We are gentlemen, so we best act like it and groom like it too. That is where Manscaped comes in. The performance package from Manscaped includes all your manly grooming and hygienic needs. The Lawnmower 4.0 will allow you to trim down all that unnecessary fur with no fear or discomfort. And with the Weed Whacker 2.0, you can whack away all those tiny nose and ear hairs with extreme precision. There's also the Soothing Crop Preserver and Reviver. Oh yeah, buddy. This stuff is good. So what are you waiting for? Use my promo code BrandyBoy at manscaped.com for 20% off your order, plus free shipping, and 2 additional free gifts. Trust me guys, your body will thank you. Big thanks to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to talking about manly things. You know, like guns. Guns are very manly. So as I was saying, what do the fans think about having modern guns in Fallout? Well, to find out, I hosted a couple of polls on my YouTube channel. With the first one, I asked the question, do you think modern guns belong in Fallout? And with 15,000 votes, 93% said yes. Further breaking that down, 77% said that the guns should diverge somewhere in the 90s, but an extra 16% took that even further and said they want to see current-day guns from the 2000s and onward. Meanwhile, only a measly 7% prefer the pure retro fantasy guns from Fallout 4. And to really put the nail in the coffin here, I asked the fans which game had their favorite assault rifle. Fallout 4's assault rifle got 4% of the vote. Fallout 3's G3 did a little bit better though, with 20%. That's kind of respectable. But of course, New Vegas' AR absolutely wiped the floor with 73% of the vote. Now that is quite a huge landslide victory. So it's pretty obvious that the community doesn't like the switch up. Overall, it seems the community just wants to stick to the guns that have already been established in the previous games. The sheer variety seen in these arsenals is what makes them so interesting. There's guns from the Wild West, World War I and II, the Cold War era, and even some from the early tactical days of the 90s and early 2000s. Plus, there's also the futuristic guns that were produced later in the 21st century. You could totally justify squeezing in some real-life guns from the 2010s and 2020s. After all, it's only the next logical step in firearms development. Like, there's no reason why guns like the Mark 18, Honey Badger, and MCX can't exist. It's only a small evolution from the M4. But of course, those guns are not officially canon. Feel free to make whatever headcanon you like though. As for me, I just like using these current day guns in my game because they have cool animations and lots of customization. And now that I think about it, that's probably the biggest reason why these mods are so dang popular. They're simply the highest quality mods out there, and at the end of the day, most players don't want to use some garbage mishmash gun mod that doesn't have high quality textures or custom animations. They want something that is professionally made, and for some reason, the highest skilled mod authors tend to focus on making tactical gun mods. As a result, there's quite a huge oversaturation of them, and that's probably why some people like to hate on them. They're just sick of seeing tactical gun number 42069 hit the hot mods for the umpteenth time. While I do think these mods are awesome, I can totally understand that sentiment, and I would definitely like to see way more Cold War era guns in Fallout. Mods aside, when it comes down strictly to established lore, we can safely say that most, if not all firearms made during the 20th century are canon in Fallout. It's only at some points in the early years of the 21st century do they fully diverge from our real-world firearms. After that point is when Fallout's futuristic fantasy guns come into play, with guns such as the 10mm pistol, the 12.7mm SMG, the sniper rifle, the combat shotgun, and of course, the laser and plasma guns. Okay, some of these do look a little bit goofy, but whatever, I'll save that energy for another time. There are some really good examples though, such as the laser RCW. They took a Tommy gun, mixed it with modern tactical plus futuristic sci-fi to make one of the coolest looking weapons in the entire franchise. This is the literal definition of retrofuturism. It's perfect for Fallout. More of this please. Just take an old design and spice it up with Fallout magic. That's honestly the best way to go about making these futuristic fantasy guns. There definitely needs to be more of them too, because it seems like there's just a huge gap in firearms development during the 21st century. Like according to Fallout 3, these guys are still using HK-G3s as standard issue up until the Great War. That's the equivalent of a modern day soldier using a M1 Garand in Afghanistan. Kinda goofy, yeah. So if anything, there should be more of these futuristic guns to further flesh out Fallout's pre-war arsenal. After all, our modern day guns would be considered antiques that would no longer be in active military service. Unless they got really desperate due to the resource wars. In that case, it's totally understandable that they would pull out old guns from storage. So actually, that makes modern guns even more relevant in the Fallout universe. I'm not saying that every raider in the wasteland, though, should be running around with a brand new shiny M4. That would just be silly. I always found it odd that there's barely any post-war handmade weapons in these games. Mostly everyone is using pre-war firearms instead. For an apocalyptic setting, you'd expect most people to be using handmade weapons, while the pre-war firearms would be treated as extremely rare, high-tier loot, especially if it's kept in good condition. Because, you know, after 300 years of abuse, these guns would be worn down quite a bit, and may require some handmade replacement parts. But in Fallout, all these guns are perfectly fine for some reason. Well, the explanation is that the gunrunners produce pre-war firearms, but I doubt they can reach every corner of the wasteland. Either way, it would simply be more characteristic for Fallout to have way more crude handmade weapons. Funnily enough, Fallout 4 is the first game that attempted that. Good idea, but terrible execution. Anyway, all of this is beyond the scope of this video. I should get back to the main point. So to truly answer the question, do modern guns belong in Fallout? Well, it depends on which developer design philosophy you agree with. If you're an enjoyer of Fallout's original aesthetic made by Black Isle and Obsidian, then yes, by all means, modern guns belong in Fallout. But if you prefer Bethesda's goofy art style, then no, modern guns don't really fit that aesthetic. But who likes this art style anyway? Clearly, not too many. But since Bethesda owns the franchise, they can do whatever they want. They can retcon as much as they like. They haven't outright said that modern guns are retconned out of Fallout, but seeing as they haven't included any in their past two titles, then we can only assume that's what they're trying to do. After all, it doesn't make any sense that these two god-awful abominations would somehow overtake the M4 and G3 as standard issue. Unless those two guns just never existed in the first place. It seems that Bethesda is trying to push back the firearm divergence point from around 2000 all the way back to 1945. That's the only way guns like this would ever exist in this universe. But even then, it still wouldn't work. The assault rifle is heavily based on machine guns from the First World War. This gun has the functionality and aesthetic of a heavy machine gun from the 1910s, so it doesn't even work with the 1950s style that Bethesda was trying to go for. They don't even understand their own intended art style. Hilarious. If they just simply included a Lewis gun, then it would be fine. But the fact that it's supposed to be a futuristic assault rifle from the 21st century is what makes it so baffling. Even if Bethesda were to restrict Fallout's guns to a purely 1950s aesthetic, then they would still have to include modern guns, because that's when they started development. You know, like the AR platform. It was literally made during the decade that they're going for, but they just completely ignored it. They even tossed out the beloved G3 from Fallout 3, but it's still shown in perks and signs in-game. Absolutely brilliant game design right there. But wait, as it turns out, these guns do still exist in Fallout, as paid weapon skins in Fallout 76. Bethesda finally recognized how much we want those guns back, so they gave them back. But you just gotta pay for it. Definitely seems like something Bethesda would do. They're not unique weapons either, just reskins of the handmade rifle with the same rigging and animations. God damn, what a lazy cash grab. If the guns in Fallout looked like this from the start, then nobody would really care or complain all that much. But since modern guns were canonized in the previous games, and are now being taken away, now that is the problem. That's the real reason why so many people passionately hate the guns in Fallout 4. Not because they're simply bad on their own, but because they're a massive downgrade from the previous games. It's obvious that the community wants their modern guns back, and that's exactly why these mods are so popular. Fans are just trying to restore what they had in the previous games. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to cleanse my eyes from the Fallout 4 Assault My Eyes rifle by playing a nice long session of Fallout New Vegas.